The abandoned mining station on Kepler 442c was supposed to be empty. That's what the salvage report said. Anyway, but as 17-year-old Marcus Chen crept through the twisted metal corridors, his plasma cutter humming softly at his belt, he could hear something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. Crying. It was a sound that transcended species. Pure, desperate fear that made his chest tighten. Marcus had grown up on the frontier, where human settlements clung to hostile worlds like barnacles on a ship's hull. He knew the sound of someone in mortal danger. Following the echoing sobs through the labyrinthine station, Marcus found her in what used to be the central processing chamber. She was small, maybe his age in human years, with iridescent blue-silver skin that seemed to shift like liquid mercury in the dim emergency lighting. Her large, dark eyes were streaming with tears that glowed faintly purple, and she was pressed against the far wall, trembling. Between Marcus and the girl, something moved in the shadows. The shadow predator was everything the horror stories claimed and worse. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its form seeming to bend light around it, making it difficult to focus on directly. Its body was a writhing mass of what looked like living darkness, punctuated by rows of crystalline teeth that gleamed like black diamonds. Worse than its appearance was the feeling it projected, a crushing sense of hopelessness that made Marcus's bones feel heavy. The creature hadn't noticed him yet. It was focused entirely on the alien girl, who was whispering something in a language that sounded like wind chimes caught in a storm. Marcus had 2 choices: run and save himself or do something monumentally stupid. He chose stupid. "Hey, ugly!" Marcus shouted, igniting his plasma cutter with a brilliant blue flare. "Pick on someone your own size." The shadow predator turned with fluid grace, and Marcus immediately regretted his decision. Its face, if it could be called that, was a void filled with swirling darkness and those terrible teeth. When it spoke, the words bypassed his ears entirely and carved themselves directly into his brain. "Foolish child, your light will feed my eternal hunger." The creature lunged with impossible speed. Marcus barely managed to raise his plasma cutter in time, the superheated beam slicing across the predator's arm. The shadow predator shrieked, a sound like reality tearing, and stumbled back, dark ichor spraying from the wound. But the creature was far from finished. It circled Marcus like a shark, its form rippling and shifting. Every time he tried to get a clear shot, it seemed to melt away into the shadows, only to reappear somewhere else. "You cannot hide from the dark, young human. All light dies eventually." "Maybe," Marcus panted, keeping the plasma cutter between himself and the predator. "But humans are pretty good at making more light." The shadow predator struck like lightning. Marcus felt claws that were colder than space itself rake across his shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground. The plasma cutter skittered away across the metal floor. As the creature loomed over him, preparing for the killing blow, Marcus heard the alien girl scream something in her musical language. Suddenly, the air around her shimmered, and beams of pure white light erupted from her hands, striking the shadow predator in the back. The creature whirled around with a roar of rage and pain, momentarily forgetting about Marcus. That was its mistake. Marcus lunged for his plasma cutter, rolled to his feet, and drove the superheated blade deep into the predator's center mass. The shadow predator's scream shattered 3 of the chamber's reinforced windows. Dark ichor poured from the wound like liquid night, and the creature's form began to collapse in on itself. But as it died, the shadow predator's claws found their mark one last time, raking across Marcus's chest and leaving 3 parallel gashes that immediately began to burn with an otherworldly cold. The creature dissolved into nothing, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and something that might have been despair. Marcus collapsed to his knees, pressing his hand to the wounds. They were already beginning to feel strange. Not painful exactly, but different. Like ice and electricity were racing through his veins. The alien girl rushed to his side, her large eyes wide with concern. When she spoke, her voice was like crystal bells, and somehow Marcus understood her perfectly. "You saved me," she said, her hands hovering over his wounds. "But the shadow's touch. You've been marked." "Marked?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer wouldn't be good. The shadow predators are weapons, she said, tears still streaming down her face. Bioweapons created by the Void Empire. Their claws carry a genetic virus that turns other species into shadow spawn. You're going to change. Marcus looked down at the 3 gashes across his chest. They were already beginning to turn black around the edges, and he could feel something cold spreading through his body. How long do I have? He asked. I don't know, she whispered. No one has ever survived the transformation before. The alien girl's name was Lyra'anthi, and she was the daughter of the Ethereal King, ruler of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. As they sat in the abandoned station's medical bay, she told Marcus her story while using her people's healing light to slow the spread of the shadow virus through his system. The Void Empire has been hunting my people for 3 cycles, she explained, her hands glowing with soft white radiance as she worked. They want to harvest our light essence to power their shadow technology. I was captured during a raid on our outer colonies. Marcus winced as another wave of cold shot through his nervous system. The black veins were now visible under his skin, spreading slowly but relentlessly from the wound site. How did you escape? I didn't, Lyra said bitterly. This was a test. The Void Emperor wanted to see if his new shadow predator could hunt down and corrupt a being of pure light. I was bait. She looked at the gashes on his chest with guilt-filled eyes. You shouldn't have interfered. Now you'll die because of me. Hey, Marcus said, catching her chin with his finger and lifting her gaze to meet his. I made that choice, and I'd make it again. Lyra's large eyes filled with fresh tears. You don't understand what's happening to you. The shadow virus doesn't just kill, it transforms. You'll become one of them, a creature of pure darkness. You'll lose everything that makes you human. Marcus felt another surge of ice through his veins and gritted his teeth. How long? Based on your physiology. Maybe 6 hours before the change becomes irreversible. That wasn't much time. Marcus stood up, testing his balance. The cold was making his movements sluggish, but he could still function. Then we better get you home. What? Lyra stared at him in shock. Marcus, you need medical attention. My people's healers might be able to. No, Marcus interrupted firmly. You said this was a test, right? That means they're watching. If I take you straight home, I'll lead them right to your people. We need to be smarter than that. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. You're really willing to die to protect people you've never met? Marcus shrugged, trying to ignore the way the movement sent icicles through his shoulder. It's not about dying. It's about making the time I have left count for something. What Marcus didn't tell her was that the transformation felt different than she described. Yes, there was cold and darkness spreading through him, but there was something else too. A strange sense of clarity, as if his mind was expanding. He could feel things he'd never felt before. The electromagnetic signatures of the station's dying power grid, the gravitational pull of the planet's 3 moons, even Lyra's emotional state radiating from her like heat. Maybe the virus was supposed to make him lose his humanity. But Marcus had always been stubborn. They spent the next 2 hours planning their escape and sending a coded message to Marcus's family ship, the Wanderer's Dream. His parents were experienced smugglers who knew how to avoid Imperial patrols, and they would be able to get Lyra to neutral space. As they worked, Marcus found his new senses growing stronger. He could hear conversations happening 3 levels below them, feel the approach of ships through the station's hull, even sense the emotional resonance of Lyra's gratitude and growing affection. The shadow virus was changing him, no doubt about it. But instead of losing his humanity, Marcus felt like he was becoming something more. The transport will be here in an hour, he said, closing the comm channel. But there's something else we need to discuss. Lyra looked up from where she was packing supplies. What? This whole situation. It's bigger than just rescuing you, isn't it? The Void Empire, the Shadow Predators, your people's light essence. This is the beginning of something. Lyra's expression grew grave. The Ethereal Council believes the Void Empire is preparing for a final assault. They've been gathering shadow predators from across the galaxy, building an army of corrupted beings. If they succeed in harvesting enough light essence, she shuddered, they could plunge entire star systems into eternal darkness. Marcus nodded slowly. The cold in his veins pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and he could feel his human DNA being rewritten one cell at a time. But his mind remained clear, his will unbroken. Then we better make sure that doesn't happen, he said. The sound of docking clamps echoed through the station. His family had arrived. As they made their way to the docking bay, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in a broken monitor screen. His eyes were beginning to change. Still human, but now flecked with points of darkness that seemed to swirl like tiny galaxies. The veins under his skin had spread to cover most of his torso, creating patterns that looked almost like circuitry. He was becoming something new, something that had never existed before. At the docking bay, Marcus's parents took one look at him and immediately understood the situation. Captain Sarah Chen and Engineer David Chen had seen enough of the galaxy's dangers to recognize a dying man when they saw one. "Son," his father said quietly, "you know we can't take you with us if you're infected." "I know, Dad." Marcus turned to Lyra. "But you can take her. Get her home, and tell her people what's coming." "Marcus, no." Lyra grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way." Marcus smiled, feeling the darkness pulse through him like a second heartbeat. "There is. I'm just not sure anyone's going to like it." The Ethereal King's name was Solaris then, and he was very, very old enough to remember when the stars were young and the galaxy was full of light. His palace on the crystal world of Luminera was carved from a single massive diamond, its faceted walls refracting starlight into dancing rainbows that painted everything in shifting, beautiful colors. When his daughter arrived with news of her rescue and the human boy's sacrifice, the king's first emotion was relief. His second was rage. "A human child died to save you," he said, his voice carrying the harmonics of distant thunder. The king stood 12 feet tall, his ethereal form wreathed in constantly shifting light that made him difficult to look at directly. "And you tell me the Void Empire planned this? That they used you as bait?" "Yes, father," Lyra said, bowing her head. "But there's more. The human Marcus, he was infected by the shadow virus, but he didn't transform the way the virus is supposed to work. Something about human biology or human will. He was changing into something new." King Solaris then was quiet for a long moment, his light dimming as he processed this information. Around them, the crystal palace sang with harmonic resonance, a sound like the music of the spheres. "Show me," he said finally. Lyra projected her memories into the air between them, a ability all ethereals possessed. The king watched Marcus's fight with the shadow predator, saw the human boy's desperate courage, witnessed the strange way the virus had affected him. "Fascinating," the king murmured. His neural patterns remained stable even as his DNA was being rewritten. "And these new abilities." He gestured at the memory of Marcus sensing electromagnetic fields and emotional resonance. The virus was trying to create a shadow spawn, but something in human genetics resisted the complete transformation. "Is he still alive?" Lyra asked desperately. The king extended his consciousness across space, searching. The ethereals could sense all sources of light and shadow across vast distances, an ability that had made them the Void Empire's primary target. After a moment, his eyes widened in surprise. "He lives," the king said slowly, "but he is changed. The shadow virus has bonded with his human essence in a way I have never seen. He has become something unprecedented, part human, part shadow, but retaining his human consciousness and will." "Then we have to help him, child," the king said gently. "He is beyond our help now. The transformation is complete. He is no longer fully human, but he is not a shadow spawn either. He has become something entirely new." King Solaris then walked to the great viewing crystal that dominated one wall of his throne room. Through it, he could see across the galaxy, watching the movements of 1,000 species and civilizations. The Void Empire's darkness was spreading like a cancer, consuming world after world. "But perhaps," the king continued thoughtfully, "this is not a tragedy. Perhaps this is an opportunity." "What do you mean?" The king turned back to his daughter, his expression grave but determined. The Void Empire believes they understand the nature of shadow and light. They think these forces are opposites, that one must destroy the other. But what if they're wrong? What if shadow and light can coexist? What if they can be unified? Lyra's eyes widened as she understood. You think Marcus could be the key to stopping them? I think, the king said, that humans may be the most remarkable species in the galaxy. They don't just survive in impossible circumstances, they adapt. They evolve. They become something greater than what they were. The king raised his hand, and light gathered around his fingers like liquid starfire. Send word to the human governments. Tell them what has happened, and prepare our fastest ship. Where are we going? To find your friend, King Solaris then said. Because if I'm right about what he's becoming, then Marcus Chen may be the only being in the galaxy who can stand against the Void Emperor himself. The king paused, his ancient eyes reflecting the dancing lights of his palace. And if I'm wrong, then we'll face the darkness together as allies should. Far across the galaxy, on a small transport ship drifting through the asteroid fields of the neutral zone, Marcus Chen opened his eyes. They were no longer entirely human, pools of deep shadow flecked with points of starlight, like looking into the void between galaxies. He could feel the king's attention on him across the vast distance, could sense Lyra's desperate hope and fear. Most remarkably, he could feel something else. The network of shadow predators spread across the galaxy, their hunger and malevolence reaching out like dark tentacles. But he could also feel something they couldn't. The spaces between the shadows, the places where light still endured. And in those spaces, Marcus sensed something the Void Empire had never encountered before. Human stubbornness. Marcus smiled, and his teeth briefly flickered between human white and crystal black before settling into something in between. The transformation was complete, but he was still himself. Still human where it mattered. Still willing to fight for what was right. 3 days after the transformation, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Wanderer's Dream, watching binary stars dance around each other in their eternal cosmic waltz. He no longer needed to breathe regularly. The shadow virus had rewritten his biology to process energy directly from ambient radiation. He could survive in vacuum, see across multiple spectrums of light, and sense electromagnetic fields from thousands of kilometers away. But the most remarkable change was his connection to the shadow network. Every shadow predator in the galaxy was linked to the Void Emperor through what humans would recognize as a quantum entanglement field. The creatures shared thoughts, experiences, and hunger across impossible distances. The virus was supposed to add Marcus to this network as another mindless drone. Instead, he had become something like a virus in their system. I can feel them, Marcus told Captain Chen as his father joined him at the viewport. Every shadow predator, every corrupted world, every tendril of the Void Empire's influence. But they can't feel me back, not clearly. It's like I'm a ghost in their network. David Chen studied his son's changed appearance with a mixture of pride and concern. Marcus looked fundamentally human still, but his skin had a faint dark shimmer to it, and his eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. Are you still you, son? Marcus considered the question seriously. I'm more me than I've ever been, he said finally. The virus was supposed to overwrite my personality, make me into a creature of pure hunger and malevolence. But human consciousness isn't just biological, it's experiential, social, cultural. The virus could change my body, but it couldn't change the 17 years of memories that make me who I am. A new voice joined the conversation. That is a profound observation, young warrior. They turned to see King Solaris then materializing on the observation deck. His form composed of pure light but somehow solid enough to cast shadows. Lyra appeared beside him, her face lighting up with joy when she saw Marcus. Your Majesty, Captain Chen said, sketching a bow. You honor our humble ship. The honor is mine, Captain. Your son has accomplished something unprecedented. The king approached Marcus, studying him with ancient eyes. May I? Marcus nodded, and the king extended one luminous hand toward him. When they touched, Marcus felt the full weight of the ethereal monarch's consciousness, eons of wisdom, power that could reshape matter at the atomic level, and a deep, abiding love for all living things. But the king felt something too, and he staggered back in amazement. "Impossible," he whispered. "You haven't just resisted the shadow virus, you've hybridized with it. You've created an entirely new form of existence." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked. The king began to pace, his light growing brighter with excitement. "The shadow virus works by overwriting the host's genetic structure with void empire coding, essentially turning them into biological machines. But human genetics are remarkably adaptable. Instead of being overwritten, Marcus's DNA has integrated the shadow elements while maintaining its core human structure." Marcus felt a surge of energy through the dark veins under his skin. "So I'm like a biological fusion reactor?" "More than that," the king said. "You're a bridge between light and shadow, order and chaos, creation and destruction. The Void Empire believes these forces are absolute opposites, but you prove they can coexist." Lyra stepped forward, her hand glowing with healing light. "Can you feel this?" she asked, reaching toward Marcus. Marcus nodded. "It's warm, comforting, but it doesn't hurt me like it should hurt a shadow being." "Because you're not a shadow being," the king realized. "You're something entirely new, a synthesis." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain Chen's voice echoed over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. We've got a Void Empire dreadnought dropping out of hyperspace." Through the viewport, they could see it. A massive ship that seemed to be carved from crystallized darkness, bristling with weapons that pulsed with malevolent energy. Shadow predators were already launching from its docking bays, their forms visible as moving patches of void against the starfield. "They found us," Lyra said, fear making her light flicker. "No," Marcus said, his hybrid senses reaching out across space. "They found me. The Void Emperor knows something's wrong with his network. He's come to investigate." The king's expression hardened into something that could have melted planets. "Then he will learn what happens when someone threatens my daughter and her protector." But Marcus was already moving toward the airlock, his body instinctively understanding how to navigate in zero gravity. "No, Your Majesty. This is my fight now." "Marcus, don't," Lyra called after him. "You don't understand what you're up against." Marcus turned back with a smile that was equal parts human determination and shadow predator confidence. "Maybe not, but I understand what I'm fighting for." As he sealed himself into an emergency EVA suit, though he suspected he no longer needed it, Marcus felt the full scope of his transformation becoming clear. He wasn't just infected with the shadow virus. He had become something the Void Empire couldn't predict or control. He had become humanity's answer to the darkness. And he was about to show the Void Emperor what happens when you mess with the wrong species. The vacuum of space felt like coming home. Marcus had ejected from the Wanderer's dream without propulsion, relying entirely on his new abilities to navigate. The shadow virus had rewritten his biology so completely that he no longer distinguished between the vacuum of space and a planetary atmosphere. It was all just different forms of energy to be absorbed and utilized. The Void Empire dreadnought was a monument to darkness, its hull absorbing light so completely that it appeared as a starship-shaped hole in space. As Marcus approached, he could feel the malevolent intelligence directing it. Ancient, hungry, and supremely confident. "Come to me, broken thing." The Void Emperor's voice echoed directly in Marcus's mind. "Let me see what my predator has made of you." Instead of responding with words, Marcus let his actions speak. He accelerated toward the dreadnought's hull, his body instinctively converting ambient cosmic radiation into kinetic energy. At the last second, he extended his hands, now tipped with claws that gleamed like black crystal, and tore through the ship's armor plating like it was paper. The Emperor's surprise rippled through the shadow network. "What are you?" Marcus pulled himself into the ship's corridors, where a squad of shadow spawn were waiting for him. These were beings that had once been various species from across the galaxy, Rigelian traders, Centauri explorers, even what looked like an ethereal warrior. Now they were all creatures of living darkness, their original forms twisted into instruments of the void. "I'm something new," Marcus said aloud, knowing the Emperor could hear him through his corrupted servants. "I'm what happens when you try to break humanity and fail." The shadow spawn attacked as one, moving with inhuman speed and coordination. But Marcus was faster. The virus had given him their abilities while his human creativity let him use them in ways they never could. He moved like liquid darkness through their ranks, his claws leaving trails of disrupted shadow matter in their wake. But instead of destroying them, he was doing something else, something that made the Void Emperor's rage spike across the network. He was freeing them. Each touch of his hybrid claws disrupted the shadow virus's control codes. Not enough to cure the infected beings, the transformation was too complete for that, but enough to give them back their free will. For the first time in decades, the shadow spawn remembered who they had been. "Impossible," the Emperor raged. "You cannot undo my work." "Watch me," Marcus replied. He fought his way through the dreadnought's corridors, leaving a trail of liberated shadow spawn in his wake. Some fled immediately, desperate to escape their torment. Others turned and began fighting alongside him, their restored personalities burning with the need for revenge against their enslaver. Finally, Marcus reached the Emperor's throne room, a vast chamber filled with swirling darkness and the harvested light essence of 1,000 conquered worlds. At its center sat the Void Emperor himself, a being so steeped in shadow that he appeared as a humanoid absence in reality. "You have caused enough disruption, hybrid," the Emperor said, rising from his throne. "Now you will serve me properly." The Emperor raised his hands, and pure darkness erupted from them. Not just the absence of light, but aggressive, consuming void that sought to unmake anything it touched. Marcus felt it washing over him, trying to complete the transformation that the shadow predator had begun. But instead of succumbing, Marcus did something the Emperor never expected. He absorbed it. The human body was remarkably adaptable. Evolution had taught it to survive everything from ice ages to cosmic radiation. The shadow virus had made Marcus into a being that could process and metabolize dark energy the same way a plant processed sunlight. Every wave of void force the Emperor threw at him made Marcus stronger. "You know what your problem is?" Marcus said, walking steadily forward as reality-dissolving darkness swirled harmlessly around him. "You think in absolutes. Light versus dark, order versus chaos, creation versus destruction. But humans, we're good at finding the middle ground." The Emperor's attack faltered in shock. "What are you?" "I'm exactly what you tried to make me," Marcus replied, reaching the steps of the throne. "I'm a shadow being, but I'm also exactly what I've always been, human. And humans don't give up." Marcus placed his hand on the Emperor's chest, and for the first time in eons, the ancient being felt fear. The touch wasn't destructive, it was transformative. Marcus began to do to the Void Emperor what the shadow virus had done to him. Not destruction, but synthesis. Not conquest, but evolution. "No," the Emperor screamed, his form beginning to destabilize. "I am eternal darkness. I am the end of all light." "You were," Marcus agreed. "But now you're something better. Now you're balanced." The Emperor's scream shook the dreadnought, but it was already too late. The hybridization was spreading through him, his absolute darkness being tempered by something he had never experienced before. Human compassion, human creativity, human hope. When it was over, the being that had once been the Void Emperor knelt before Marcus. His form now a swirling mixture of light and shadow that was somehow more beautiful than either alone. "What have you done to me?" he asked, his voice no longer carrying the psychic weight of absolute malevolence. "I gave you a choice," Marcus said simply. "For the first time in your existence, you can choose to be something other than a force of pure destruction." Across the galaxy, the shadow network began to change. Predators that had been mindless killing machines suddenly found themselves capable of independent thought. Corrupted worlds began to heal as the aggressive darkness that had consumed them transformed into something that could coexist with light. The war between the Void Empire and the forces of light was over. Not because one side had won, but because the very nature of the conflict had been transformed. Later, as Marcus stood on the observation deck of the converted dreadnought, now renamed the Unity, he watched King Solaris then and the being who had once been the Void Emperor working together to plan the galaxy's reconstruction. Lyra joined him at the viewport, her hand finding his. Where their skin touched, light and shadow swirled together in perfect harmony. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your humanity to save everyone?" Marcus looked at their joined hands, then up at the stars that seemed brighter now, as if the galaxy itself was healing. "I didn't give up my humanity," he said. "I expanded it. I became more human, not less." "How do you figure that?" Marcus smiled, his hybrid nature allowing him to see beauty in both the brilliant stars and the deep spaces between them. "Because being human isn't about our biology or our genetics. It's about making choices, choosing to help others, choosing to hope when things seem hopeless, choosing to be better than what the universe expects us to be." He squeezed her hand gently. "The shadow virus tried to make me into a monster. Instead, it gave me the power to choose what kind of monster I wanted to be. And I chose to be the kind that protects people." Lyra laughed, the sound like silver bells in a spring breeze. "The galaxy is going to be a very different place with humans in it." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, watching as the first joint human ethereal patrol ships began their missions to heal the shadow-corrupted worlds. "It's going to be better." In the distance, a new star was being born, hydrogen and cosmic dust collapsing under their own gravity until fusion ignited, creating light from darkness. It was a process that had been happening for billions of years, but now Marcus could feel it happening, could sense the beautiful violence of creation itself. The universe was vast and often cruel, full of predators and empires and beings who thought might made right. But it was also full of beings willing to stand up for each other, to make sacrifices for strangers, to choose hope over despair. It was full of humans. And now, thanks to a stubborn teenager who refused to let darkness have the final word, it was full of something even better. The infinite possibility that came from choosing to be more than what you were born to be. The shadow predator had tried to make Marcus into a weapon. Instead, it had made him into something far more dangerous, a human being with the power to change everything. And change everything he had. 1 year later, the Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. Representatives from 1,000 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Station. But the real marvel wasn't the diversity of life forms present. It was the harmony. Where once there had been rigid divisions between light-based and dark matter species, now there were hybrid civilizations that drew power from both sources. The technology that had emerged from this synthesis was beyond anything previously imagined. Ships that could phase between dimensions, weapons that healed instead of destroyed, cities that existed in perfect balance between matter and energy. At the center of it all sat 3 figures who had become legends across the galaxy. King Solaris then, his light now tempered with threads of gentle shadow that made him more approachable, more real. Lyra'anthi, who had become the first ethereal shadow hybrid diplomat, her healing abilities enhanced by her understanding of darkness. And Marcus Chen, the human boy who had refused to let transformation destroy his humanity. The terraforming initiative has restored 17 formerly dead worlds in the past 6 months, Lyra reported to the assembled delegates. The hybrid gardens on New Eden are producing food that can sustain both light-based and shadow-based metabolisms. The Shadow Rehabilitation Program has successfully restored free will to over 3 million formerly corrupted beings, added the individual who had once been the Void Emperor, now calling himself Umbral. They are choosing to use their abilities to help rather than harm. But it was Marcus who delivered the most important news. The first generation of naturally born hybrids has reached adolescence, he announced. Children who are native to both light and shadow, who will never know the artificial division between them. They represent the future, not just for our species, but for all life in the galaxy. In the audience, a young being stood up, half human, half ethereal, her form shifting between solid matter and pure energy as naturally as breathing. "I want to join the Exploration Corps," she announced in a voice that carried harmonics no single species could produce. "I want to find other species that need help bridging their differences." Marcus smiled. remembering the scared human boy who had stumbled into an abandoned mining station and found his destiny. Application accepted. Cadet Luminara Chenanthi. After the session, the three leaders stood together on Nexus Station's observation deck, watching the traffic of 100 species moving peacefully through space. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been so stubborn?" Marcus asked. King Solaris then chuckled, a sound like distant wind chimes. "My boy, stubbornness may be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Without it, none of this would exist." Lyra leaned against Marcus's shoulder, her light and his shadow creating patterns that were more beautiful than either could produce alone. "The prophets used to say that the galaxy would end in either eternal light or eternal darkness," she mused. "But they never considered that it might end in something better, eternal possibility." Marcus nodded, watching as a group of hybrid children, human, ethereal, Rigelian, and a dozen other species, played together in the station's central park, their combined abilities creating fountains of light and shadow that danced through the air like living aurora. "You know what the best part is?" he said. "This is just the beginning. Humans are good at adapting, but we're even better at helping others adapt too. Give us another generation, and there won't be any pure species left in the galaxy. Just a whole lot of beings who learned that being different doesn't have to mean being enemies." Above them, the stars shone with new light, not the harsh brilliance of suns or the consuming darkness of void, but something in between. Something that had never existed before a human boy decided that being a monster was a choice, not a destiny. The shadow predator had tried to make him into a weapon. Instead, it had made him into something far more powerful, a teacher, and the galaxy would never be the same.